One of the greatest and most concise pieces of criticism I ever read was 2 words, and I can't remember who wrote it. I think it was Scott Tobias. It just leapt into my brain and stayed there forever. But this writer described the movie Pawn Sacrifice as a Zwikipedia article, the most pure and beautiful reduction I'd ever encountered. Zwick's films are by and large a few things. Good-natured, informative, left-leaning, extremely old-school in their plot specifics.
I ain't fighting this war for you, sir.
I see.
I mean, what's the point? Ain't nobody gonna win. It's just gonna go on and on.
Can't go on forever.
Yeah, but ain't nobody gonna win, sir.
Somebody's gonna win.
Who?
And a crushing bore. Zwick makes films like the heyday of the studio system never changed or ended.
You're under no obligation to say anything, Major.
X, Major.
Upon leaving yesterday, did you attempt to contact Major Turner? Did you confront her attorney, Colonel Moorcroft, at Fort Dyer at 1100?
You told me not to say anything.
And yet, just one time, Zwick made a movie that went past polite politics, went past rah-rah civil victories, and he accidentally predicted the next 20 years of American history for good and ill.
خليني سابك.
How long have you been at it?
Not long enough, apparently.
How much longer do you think before he gives up the other cells?
He can't give up the other cells if he doesn't know where they are.
He knows.
No, he doesn't. You said it yourself, Sharon, didn't you? In the strategy meeting, the briefing, one cell doesn't know where the other one is, right?
How long before he breaks, Sharon?
Well, at this rate, too long. The theater was hit 9 hours after we took down the first cell.
So, what other models do we have? Shaking? What about it, Sharon?
Won't work.
Works for the Israelis.
Only in conjunction with sleep deprivation. It takes at least 36 hours.
We don't have 36 hours. Electric shock?
The neurotransmitters just shut down.
Water?
Palestinian authorities producing good intel with water.
Of course, there's cutting.
It's extremely messy.
Are you people insane? What are you talking about?
The time has come for one man to suffer in order to save hundreds of lives.
One man. What about 2? Huh? What about 6? How about public executions, huh?
Feel free to leave whenever you like, Agent Hubbard.
Come on, General, you lost men, I've lost men, but you can't do this. What if what they really want, what if they don't even want to shake? Have you considered that? Huh? What if what they really want is for us to herd children in the stadiums like we're doing? And put soldiers on the street and have Americans looking over their shoulders, bend the law, shred the Constitution just a little bit. Because if we torture him, General, we do that and everything that we have bled and fought and died for is over. And they've won. They've already won.
Escort him out.
The siege was picketed by Muslims, who rightly thought that the film villainized them. Critics didn't care for it either. I'm willing to bet you know this movie, don't you? Even if you haven't seen it, you remember it playing cable TV in airplanes and adorning the walls of your favorite video rental place. This is one of those films that's sort of always been in the groundwater of conversation about modern cinema, even if at the time of its release it wasn't very well liked. Apparently, rentals of the film skyrocketed after 9/11. A country angry and confused went looking for Hollywood's insight into terrorism. If anyone had listened to The Siege, they'd have learned that profiling doesn't work.
Frank?
Hop! They got Frankie. What? My kid's in here. My kid's in here someplace. It's only 13th.
All right, we'll get him out. We'll find him, Frank. We'll get him out.
Frank, I'm dead!
We'll get him out.
Ow! They came into my house. My wife told them who I was. How many times did I put it on the line, Hub? How many times? 20 years with American citizens. 10 years in the Bureau. They knocked her down. They took him out of my house. Frank, I'm dead!
Listen to me. Listen to me. Frank. It's wrong. We'll find him. All right, we'll find him. Come on.
No! I'll find him. Besides, this is where I belong. Here. Tell them I'm not their sand nigger anymore.
And that usually the people trying to kill us are also in bed with us.
It's fine, Rod. He's cool.
What are you fucking doing here? Hey, you know what's happened outside? They're getting Arabs out there.
You can put a stop to it, Samir.
What are you talking about? The army's here. They're setting up interrogation centers right now. They're torturing people in cellars.
Calm down, all right?
I got to get out of here, and you have to help me.
We'll help you.
I just need more money.
Okay. You got a student visa for Ali Waziri.
I told you, I know nobody of that name.
Liar! Tell him what he wants to know!
Crazy.
He knows!
He's fucking crazy! I think you just
Fucking
don't know who
knows.
they really are. They go
Shut
to
up!
trust someone
Stop
like me.
simpering! Look, I've got a picture of the two of us, Samir. You remember that picture? Well, I'm gonna post it in every shop in Brooklyn. And then I'm gonna send copies to some friends of mine in the West Bank. Your mother's still there, isn't she?
All right, all right.
Fucking let go!
All
of
right,
me!
all right.
No.
Get out of here. Get out.
The Siege is probably Zwick's best movie. A grand and expensive and sturdy tale of our incredibly slippery and shameful approach to counterterrorism and its effect on domestic policy. Denzel Washington and Tony Shalhoub are FBI agents in New York who realize that they're in over their heads dealing with the growing presence of Middle Eastern terrorist sects in the city. They try to work with CIA agent Annette Bening to ferret out the people responsible for a bus bombing, but they realize the problem is bigger than them. When the carnage continues and no suspects emerge, the military is called in, and Brooklyn is sealed off and subjected to martial law. Turns out the CIA trained the terror cells, and they'll continue to cause havoc by pretending to be a part of peaceful protests to teach the U.S. a lesson about meddling with other countries' affairs. The military and the CIA need the show to go on to justify their hideous actions. It's funny. We're now nearly 20 years out from the 9/11 terror attacks, and the one thing that became clear that we can still nevertheless not simply say out loud is that the U.S. was responsible for what happened that day. Directly, indirectly, in every way. We trained the men who carried those attacks out. We destabilized the region they called home, and then we reinvaded, much to the good of the handful of people in charge, and their oil interests and stock portfolios. For decades now, the U.S. has been a shell game of invasions and threats, and not a single person responsible for the calamity of Middle Eastern foreign policy going back to the 1970s has spent a day in prison, despite a body count nearly in the trillions. Still, one president after another waits in line to get to the podium and treat the people of the Middle East like monsters of old, only accessible through a time machine, and only fit to destroy or help out with equally virulent military intervention. This has been going on longer than my entire life. It is, in hindsight, something of a tiny miracle that Hollywood let Ed Zwick make a movie that ends with a 4-star general in handcuffs and a CIA agent held accountable for engineering a terrorism crisis and withholding her role in its organization. The world will make madmen of all of us. And for a minute it turned Edward Zwick into a prophet. The Siege is still problematic and could have stood a few more stark and honest characterizations of the relationship between the U.S. and its Middle Eastern citizens.
You know we can't go in until the president invokes the War Powers Act, Steve.
Well, I understand that, General. Let's assume for a moment that the order has been given.
12 hours after the president gives the order, we can be on the ground. One light infantry division of 10,700 men. Elements of the Rapid Deployment Force, Special Forces, Delta, APCs, helicopters, tanks, and of course the ubiquitous M16A1 assault rifle. a humble enough weapon until you see it in the hands of a man outside your local bowling alley or 7-Eleven.
It's also bitterly ironic that it shows armed soldiers in the streets after a Middle Eastern terrorist action. But what it really took to get M16s in the streets? The protests in Ferguson, Missouri, after the killing of Michael Brown. The U.S. has never been afraid to turn its might on its own citizens when there isn't a clear enough villain out there. When we go too long without an antagonist, we create one. The siege knew it, and it's time the rest of us learn it and never forget.